Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you're keeping well and enjoying this holiday period. I apologise that the first verse that we're reading is about hand washing. You've probably had enough of hand washing to last a lifetime, but we'll return to that later. I had a recent phone call from a friend of mine celebrating his 50th anniversary of becoming a Christian. We're going to go out for a walk and have a meal together. And then when he told me the date, 12th of August, I thought, oh, that's extraordinary, because I became a Christian also on the 12th of August, 12 years earlier. And we thought, what are the odds of this happening? And then I really realised that for teenagers, an awful lot of people go to camps, house parties, beach missions and things in August. So I guess if we were able to have a poll of people listening, there might be quite a lot of people who became Christians in August. On the other hand, it made me then think, with some sorrow, that whether you're a teenager watching this or you've got teenage children or grandchildren even who would have been going to such an activity and have been denied access to it this year because of the lockdowns and so on, just to reassure you that God has got good purposes for you. You're not going to miss out on anything. You don't have to be at a big meeting in order to give your life to Christ. You can do it privately anytime he calls you to do so. The only caveat I would add is that you do have to make a commitment of telling somebody else what you've done, which happens automatically if you're doing it in a public place, but if you're doing it privately, tell your youth leader or whoever that you've done that, so you're not going to lose out. Now, today's readings and so on have been assigned to us by the Church of England lectionary, and maybe a bit surprising at first glance, but this passage in Isaiah that we've just had read to us is actually quite apposite after all. Broadly speaking, the context is that in Isaiah's time the people had been very shallow in their relationship with God. They had been using a dead sort of religion. They'd incorporate all sorts of idol worship and other things as well. They were about to be punished and go into exile. But he was coming up with a vision beyond that of what it might be like, or what it should be like, when they come back from exile and re-inhabit Jerusalem years later down the line, as it happens in the era of Nehemiah and Ezra. What sort of society should they have been that would have avoided them going off into captivity in their immediate prospects? Now, this passage in Isaiah 56 really talks about three groups of people and what's required for a godly society. The first group, just the ordinary, if you like, run-of-the-mill people coming back from exile, the five conditions that God wanted of them for a stable, sustainable, God-pleasing society were: maintain justice. They'd been very poor at that in the past. They'd swindled people, they neglected the poor, they'd given corrupt judgments and so on. So maintaining justice is a vital ingredient. It's even put first in this list of five things in verses 1 and 2. Do what is right. It sounds common sense, but doing that, putting it into practice, is nonetheless a requirement. The man who holds this fast, in other words, keeps on doing it. If you go back to Nehemiah, you find that they did start acting this way, but it soon petered out. So holding fast to doing that, keeping the Sabbath without desecrating it, really is meaning obeying God's laws in general, faithfully, not saying we've grown out of that now, we're modern day thinkers, we don't need to obey God's commands. We jolly well do. Keep your hand from doing any evil. So those are very simple rules. There's nothing to do with rules and regulations like you've got to wear this uniform or you've got to do that or the other. Formal religion doesn't come into it. This is all about the heart, behaviour and attitude of mind towards God. Now, interestingly, there are two other categories of people introduced into this story. Foreigners. Now, some of those would have been those who crept into the country in their absence while they were in exile in Babylon, but other foreigners as well. And of course, we have that as an issue in our own country. It was part of why we went in for Brexit, and there's all kinds of Black Lives Matter, all kinds of issues swirling around in the general debate at the moment. And the attitude to foreigners is the same. Not to think that Israel is totally exclusive, but let no foreigner who has bound himself to the Lord say, the Lord will surely exclude me from his people. What he goes on to say is, the foreigners who bind themselves to the Lord to serve him, to love the name of the Lord, to worship him, keep his Sabbaths, hold fast his covenant, look at the blessings they're going to have. I will bring them to my holy mountain, give them joy in my house of prayer. Their offerings will be accepted. My house is going to be called a house of prayer for all nations. The sovereign Lord declares, I will gather still others to them besides those already gathered. That there's a place in heaven for people of any background. Any background. I've only been abroad a few times to third world countries, but I have met some most fantastic Christians in really impoverished places. They are way up there in the scale of things in faith. They can teach us so much. The people who've come through hardship, many of them perhaps even in our own congregation, I don't know all their stories, I'm only a relative newcomer, but they may have come through the most horrendous times of testing of their faith. That faith needs to be acknowledged, and certainly is by God. It needs to be acknowledged by us. Our society is welcoming. The third group of people mentioned, a bit more controversially perhaps in this passage, are people called eunuchs. Now, if you don't know about eunuchs, they were men castrated in the past in their service of various kings and rulers who had harems and lots of women servants and so on around, and it was more or less to neuter them and take sex out of the equation, so they just had their mind on their jobs and not on the women drifting around in their field of view, or vice versa. But we can look at it more widely in the church today. There are obviously very few literal eunuchs as such in this day and age, but there are plenty of people who are sad because they can't have children and feel lesser because of it. There are people who have all kinds of things that make them have low self-esteem in different ways, and I think this is a sort of a metaphor for lots of people who feel marginalised by their situation, by their past, and they're not in any way disqualified from an equal status in the kingdom of God. Look what it says for them, for the eunuch. This is particularly poignant actually. It says, let not any eunuch complain, I am only a dry tree. I.e. can't have children, and most people think that children are a blessing from God. To the eunuchs who keep my Sabbath and choose what pleases me and hold fast to my covenant, I'll give them in my temple, within its walls, a memorial and a name, better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will not be cut off. They are accepted on the same grounds as anybody else, putting God at the centre of their lives. And I say this to particularly, let's say, the children, the teenagers watching this who've been deprived of a summer holiday that might have been an opportunity for making a commitment to Christ. You can do that in the same way that these categories here. If you put God as your Lord, that's what it really means. It means putting him first. It means you voluntarily want to follow his path and take the lead that he gives for your life. Don't say, I can't be bothered with school in September because I've missed so much, or I can't be bothered to go to university. God has a plan for your life. If you submit to him as Lord, he'll sort it, which way that goes. Going back to our other reading about washing of hands and so on, Jesus is concerned for people not to be so concerned with outward appearances. What he's interested in is what's inside. It's no use me cleaning the outside of this cup. It's not going to make it any more appetizing to drink. It's what's inside that matters. And Jesus says later on in this passage, it's out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what make a man unclean, not eating with unwashed hands. So that was tying in really with Jesus's assessment that the Pharisees of the day had reverted back to the same state that Isaiah was complaining about, not the picture I painted just now of what society should be like. They'd gone back to being highly critical of outsiders, of rejecting people unclean, and criticising Jesus for eating with tax collectors and sinners. They'd reverted back to all the old ways, and Jesus had a real ding-dong with them all through his life, criticising the same faults really. Contrast that with the Canaanite woman, not a Jew, Canaanite woman who comes to Jesus with a sick child. Now, this story could be problematic if you take it too literally. You can think that Jesus is a racist, that Jesus has got all kinds of attitudes, but he's actually only mouthing the attitude, parodying, if you like, the attitudes of the people around him at the time. First time comes to him, she says, "Can you heal my daughter?" He doesn't say anything at all. Second time she asks and repeats, "Lord, help me." It's not right for taking the children's bread and giving it to the dogs. I've only been sent to the Jews. And you're not a Jew. And she won't take no for an answer. And she actually begs him and says, even the dogs get the crumbs under the rich man's table. And Jesus, in a sense, has no answer to that. She's backed him into a corner because she knows, and he knows, and it's part of his plan, obviously, the way he was drawing her out with these provocative answers. Yes, of course he's going to heal her, but what faith has she shown in front of all the others, more than the Jews around? She understood who he was. She understood that he had the power to heal, and she actually knew that he would not actually turn out to be prejudiced and only deal with the Jews, which is of course his intention all along, to save the whole world, not just to save the Jews. And she stands for all time as a testimony of persistent faith. There were other stories of persistent widows and people who had searched and wouldn't take no for an answer, of blind Bartimaeus who shouted all the louder until he heard Jesus, and so on. In heaven, this Canaanite woman is not going to be grovelling on the floor licking up crumbs. She's going to be right up there with the people of faith. 2,000 years after, this story is still being told, just like the woman with the alabaster box that she broke. And the general thing, those who've been forgiven much love most, is going to turn the scales completely upside down in heaven. The poor people that I've met in Africa and India, there's one example in India where I was teaching. There was a man doing a maintenance job around the school, mending broken desks and things like that. That was his job. In his spare time, he he ran with his wife an orphanage of 25 children, brought up from 4 to 18. 25! That was his spare time job. He had to clothe them, feed them, grow the vegetables for 25 people and his own family. The faith that they were showing, the sacrifice, is absolutely staggering. And the energy it took to do all that, before he comes to work to do his school job and then goes back in doing all that. Extraordinary. And, these people will get great merit in heaven. Great merit. Softies, I have to put myself in this, who've had an easy life, have hardly started yet to know what dealing with hardship is. We think we have a hard time, but it's nothing like the hard time that a lot of people have had. So let's bear that in mind. God gave me one particular word that I just need to bind all these thoughts together with. It's a word that's used quite often in a slightly different context. It's the word confidence. Boris Johnson tries to sound confident that things are going to go forward. We like confidence in our leaders, clarity, and getting it right as well. I do remember watching a television programme some while ago with hopefuls trying to get into the SAS, and there was this marvellous chap who was a brilliant leader in human terms. The only slight problem was that he misread the map and he led them brilliantly but to the wrong place. That's no good. We need people who are confident and also right, and that is something that God can give to us. What can we have confidence in? If we're doubtful about having confidence in people, we might be doubtful about job security, educational prospects, and all kinds of things we can be doubtful about. Or where can we get confidence from in uncertain times? What are the rocks that we can build on? I'm thinking of my baby granddaughter trying to learn to walk, and some things she grabs hold of to try and haul herself up aren't up to the job and give way. Other things are more solid and she hauls herself up onto her legs and grabs them for dear life. What can we hold that's secure? Well, the meaning of the word confidence really, I think, is having faith that you actually act on and put into practice. It's the doing of it. It demonstrates the confidence. I remember my son sitting on the top board in the swimming pool once at school on a Sunday afternoon, and the High Master came in with some distinguished guests, and they wouldn't leave until he jumped his first jump. It took them quite a while waiting there, but he did it eventually. Confidence means you actually end up believing that it's going to work. You have it in sport, the confidence to make a brave tackle when the bloke the other way is bigger than you and heavier than you. It takes confidence to do many things. It's the step of faith. Paul says we can be confident of one thing, that he who has begun a good work in us will bring it to completion. He doesn't say the path will be easy, but he does say that he will bring it to completion. What does he say when he sends us out into all the world? I will be with you always to the end of the world. We can be confident of that. We know that Jesus, our great high priest, who has suffered all the same things that we do, is in heaven understanding, and we can approach with confidence the throne of grace. But knowing that he's been here, he's known it, he can help, he wants to help. He is for us, crumbs, he's made us for just such a time as this. We can show our faith most clearly in the darkest of times. Confidence in him won't let us down. It won't mean the path is easy, but it will mean the outcome is secure. Let's end with that thought. We can trust in him because he believes in us. We are children of God. He's not just our boss. He's not just our King, He's our Father, our friend, our helper. He created us to be with Him. That is exactly what He wants. God bless you all in this coming week. Amen.